Turkey toughens its stance against Syria over the downed fighter jet. The message from the furious Prime Minister Erdogan is clear: attack us again and we will retaliate. No more military arrests in Egypt following a landmark ruling by judges. This as the president-elect and his supporters try to claw back powers from the army. And in Paris, the red carpet's being rolled out for Aung San Suu Kyi, the Burmese democracy icon's coming to thank France for its support and to ask for that support to continue on in the future. Those are our headlines this hour here on France 24. Thanks very much for being with us. I'm Catherine Nicholson in the newsroom. Now, a clear and imminent threat. That's how Turkey's Prime Minister has described the shooting down of a Turkish fighter jet by the Syrian military on Friday. For Tayyip Erdogan, there will be no more chances for Syria. He's vowed to retaliate against any similar incidents in future.
The engagement rules given to the Turkish armed forces have now been changed. In regards to Syria, if there are any military instruments or troops which head towards the Turkish border in the form of a threat, they will all be perceived as a military threat and will be acted on accordingly.
Earlier on today, NATO members met on Mr Erdogan's request to discuss their response to all of this. And the International Military Organisation expressed support, but stopped short of proposing any action. We can get more on this from our Turkey correspondent, Jasper Mortimer. Now, Jasper, did Mr Erdogan really expect NATO to do anything about this incident? Would have been quite an escalation, surely.
I don't think the government, and particularly the foreign ministry, expected more than it got. Turkey has some very shrewd diplomats, and they know that the NATO Council comprises the ambassadors of 28 member states, and getting them to agree on issuing more than a statement is extremely hard. Now, for shooting down this plane, Turkey could accuse the Syrians of being trigger-happy, of being reckless, but it couldn't accuse Syria of endangering the NATO alliance. There wasn't enough evidence of that. So NATO's response was appropriate. But separately, Turkey received strong verbal support from the foreign ministers of France and Britain, Germany and the US. So I think it's pleased.
Well, Turkey has been implicated in the conflict in Syria for quite some time now in various ways. So in the absence of a NATO response, what can we expect Turkey to do going forward?
Well, Turkey's involvement in the Syrian crisis is basically that it's hosting more than 30,000 refugees at the moment. It also hosts the rear base of the insurgents' army, the Free Syrian Army, who are allowed to have a base just inside, 5 kilometers inside the Turkish border, but they're not allowed to bear arms there. However, wounded members of the Free Syrian Army are treated free of charge in Turkish hospitals. Turkey stresses that it doesn't give the Free Syrian Army weapons, and it has denied reports in American newspapers that it is turning a blind eye to allowing the Saudis and the Qataris to supply weapons to the Syrian insurgents through its territory. However, as you heard the Prime Minister say today, he's going to toughen the Turkey's military response to any violations of that border. He said that any Syrian military approach to the border will be treated as a threat and as a military target. He also said in his speech that Syrian helicopters had violated Turkish airspace 5 times recently, and today he was signaling that if they do that again, they will be shot down.
Very clear message there from the Turkish Prime Minister. Thanks very much, Jasper Mortimer, reporting there for us from Ankara. Well, meanwhile, inside Syria, there are reports of more violence around the capital, Damascus. And meanwhile, the International Red Cross and Syrian Red Crescent are set to try once again to evacuate civilians from the city of Homs as violence there continues.
Smoke rises above the suburbs of the Syrian capital. This video apparently shows the Al-Hama neighbourhood some 8 kilometres from the centre of Damascus. Opposition fighters claim to be battling soldiers from the elite Republican Guard here. Damascus has largely escaped the violence seen elsewhere in the country. Activists say these are the fiercest clashes seen near the capital. A different picture in Homs. This amateur footage claims to show shelling in the central Syrian city under fire for months. Witnesses say they've seen helicopter gunships and tanks in recent days. Reports too of clashes between the army and rebel fighters and many casualties.
No one can get aid into the areas that need it. There's not enough food either, and it's impossible to provide it. The Red Cross can't get anything into Homs.
Close to Homs in Rastan, there were also reports of shelling. In this amateur footage, we can hear an activist describe the scene. Rastan is on fire, he says. Is there anyone that can help? The UN Secretary-General has called for more to be done to protect people in Syria. Its observers in Damascus have started to venture out again after a week-long suspension of their mission. They say it's still difficult to move around.
I hope that we'll be able to resume a more proactive profile in the coming days.
In the next days?
I hope so, but events on the ground is going to make that decision.
Russia and China still won't agree to more UN sanctions, despite pressure from other Security Council members. Syria has warned against foreign intervention, saying it could harm more civilians than it would help.
Well, and just returning briefly to Turkey's role in the Syrian conflict, that's going to be the subject of the France 24 debate tonight with François Picard, who's here in the studio. François, what angles are you specifically looking at here for Turkey?
Well, the question is, what will be the tipping point at this point for Ankara? You just saw those images fighting around the city of Damascus, the UN observers unable to deploy, the spillover effect. Now, Turkey, remember at one point we were talking about how Turkey might have some kind of safe haven in the north of Syria. Then that went quiet. This is a real test for Ankara. Getting involved in the quagmire that is Syria's civil war is something that you have to think through. Hence the fact that they went to NATO and decided to go with a multilateral approach on dealing with this issue of the plane being shot down. We've been asking you, by the way, what the tipping point is for Turkey in the Syrian conflict on the France 24 debate Facebook page. It could prove a test, Catherine, for whether or not Turkey's star power in the region, which has grown so dramatically over the past decade, waxes or wanes.
OK, we'll be looking out for that tonight on the France 24 debate. That's just after our 7 o'clock Paris time news bulletin. Thanks very much, François. Now moving on to Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood is working to claw back some democratic powers from the army. A court has already, in the last few hours, cancelled a decree that allowed the military to arrest ordinary civilians. It had only been signed into law 2 weeks ago, but campaigners successfully argued that it was, in fact, illegal. The military council is due to hand over power to the new president, Mohamed Morsi, on July the 1st. His supporters have accused the army of attempting a soft coup. This after it recently dissolved parliament and reduced presidential powers in the constitution. Here in Paris, the red carpet is being rolled out at the presidential palace, ready to receive a much-feted guest. The Burmese democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has arrived in France. Later on, she'll meet the president, François Hollande. It is the final leg of her long-awaited European tour.
It was her first trip to Europe in 23 years, and Aung San Suu Kyi had a lot of catching up to do. After briefly falling ill in Switzerland, the Burmese democracy leader went to Norway on the 16th of June, where she finally collected the Nobel Peace Prize she was awarded in 1991. For the Nobel Committee, there was never any doubt she would one day pay a visit.
We never forgot Aung San Suu Kyi. When we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001, with more than 30 Peace Prize laureates attending, we left one chair empty, and the appeals for your freedom were many.
Suu Kyi then moved on to the UK, where she visited her alma mater, Oxford University, to receive an honorary doctorate. Also the workplace of her late husband, the university sustained her through her years under house arrest.
During the most difficult years, I was upheld by memories of Oxford. These were among the most important inner resources that helped me to cope with all the challenges I had to face.
She met both Prince Charles and Foreign Minister William Hague, and also Prime Minister David Cameron. She supported Mr Cameron's decision to invite Burmese leader Thein Sein to London for talks.
I think it's right to invite him because we don't want to be shackled by the past. We want to use the past to build up a happier future.
It's then on to France for the last leg of her trip. 2 busy weeks for the 67-year-old who has seized the opportunity to put forward the cause for Burma's long-dormant democracy movement.
And that's it from the newsroom. Do stay tuned to France 24.